Hey, Speckle or Demos Alliance, it's me, Speckle here, coming to a video. In this video, I am doing the end of school year special, so I hope y'all enjoy. And this video, it is MHA, and mostly of Class 1A, some, class, UA teachers, and some villains, and all the villains were either in Tartarus or killed, and, like, someone like Dobby, who was killed in the manga, doesn't survive, but someone like Nemore, who died in the manga, does survive. Something like that. So without further ado, let's roll and let's get into this video, and let's go. Like and subscribe if you enjoy this video. UA's Class 1A were training with one another in order to get better control of their quirks. Izuku Midoriya was training with his girlfriend, Ashaka Uraraka, with her leading him around, and the friend of his, Tsuyu, also using her tongue wrapped around him, so that way he could actually gain more and better control of float, which is a quirk that allows him to, you guessed it, fly, but although it's only temporary. He doesn't have very good control, unlike his vigilante past, but he was steadily getting more and more skilled at it. The reason for the decline in power was because he wasn't using it as often. Ever since the fight with Shigaraki and him defeating him, he didn't really find a reason to use the quirk. But with some words of All Might, he decided to actually pick up and start using the quirk again. He has been using Bajin and other quirks like Blackwood a lot more often, because it would actually help him more with capturing villains. But the float quirk would actually be a lot more helpful. He would still write notes on how to improve it, and he would train with it every now and again, but just not as often. Tsuyu was the first to disappear, which causes Izuku to start flying upwards. Ochako decided to release it because she needed Izuku's help to find Tsuyu. She thought it was a villain attack because she saw out of the corner of her eye a bright white flash of light. She released her quirk, and Izuku didn't fall to the ground because he had the float quirk activated, and he slowly fell back down to the ground and ran over to Ochako in less than a second and asked, "What's going on?" They looked around them, and they saw more and more people starting to disappear in bright flashes of light. They each, one by one, heard little whispers or something. But finally, Ochako and Izuku were standing next to each other when they heard, "Izuku Midoriya, Ochako Uraraka, you and your class have been chosen to participate in a game." They suddenly, a bright white light enveloped both of them. They looked up and around, and Izuku thought to himself, "I remember this place." They ran around, and Uraraka soon found Tsuyu and asked her if she knew what was going on. She said, "I don't know, Ribbit." And Izuku gathered Class 1A around after rounding the rest of them up and said, I've been here before, although the memory's fuzzy." "Have?" Ochako said, "Yeah. Remember when I was a vigilante during year 1 or 2? "Yeah, I do." "Was it guided with this, right?" "Well, I have a memory of me disappearing and then reappearing during that time, and it was like a fight. I was using a mech of sorts. I was defeated by someone I can't remember." "You being defeated by someone from our world?" No, not from... Oh, wait, how do you know our world? Ochako said. Izuku said. Ochako then said, just to guess, we have people with quirks that can travel to different planets. I was expecting like a different planet in our world, but our universe, but I'm guessing it's not from our universe. No, these powers were far exceeding quirks. I remember seeing this blue-haired person. I believe it was a female. They were radiating power far beyond anything I assumed was One for All. Okay, something isn't right here. They looked around them. Class 1A was all there. So were some of the villains they have fought in the past. Izuku looked up and said, I thought I killed you. He turned to Shigaraki. Shigaraki said, I thought I died. Looks like I might get revenge. But before they could attack each other, they realized they couldn't use their quirks. They could use their speed enhancement parts, but never were able to hit. They tried hitting one another, but the punches either stopped, like a barrier was in the way, or went right through them. And Tsuyu was the first one to deploy, along with the others. Tsuyu looked around and saw that it was a 1v1 team match. One team had villains and one team had heroes. The villains were greatly outmatched in terms of power and in terms of numbers, but she knew the villains could figure out a way to take them out one by one, especially with Shigaraki's decay quirk. So you looked up and around and saw that she was close to All Might and Midnight, the closest one being Midnight. So using a mini-map she found at the corner of her eyesight, she found her way to Midnight, and she asked Midnight if she had any clue what was going on. Midnight said no, but they soon found themselves surrounded by something that looked like players, like these people that were wearing similar clothing. They matter of factly looked like the same person. They could tell they were fighting one another, but after a few of them were eliminated, they activated their quirks because they saw them coming towards them with guns. Tsuyu managed to leap out of the way. Midnight was hit a few times before she managed to get out of the way as well. They kept shooting each other. Midnight used her quirk and knocked these people out. They were down, but they were still moving. Midnight said, I don't think they're human. All Might, in his skinny form, ran over with a gun and shot them in the head. Midnight said, Toshinori, what are you doing? He's innocent. All Might said, I don't think we are in our world, let alone duck, he said right as a missile went over their head. They were pushed out of the way by All Might. They looked up and All Might lifted up pulled out his own rocket launcher and proceeded to fire 9 shots at it. Each of the ones connected and eventually just downed and killed the player. Come on, you gotta be kidding me. He looked around and saw there was a building nearby. Tsuyu, Midnight, inside, now. They bolted for the room, for the building, and managed to run inside, but Tsuyu managed to pick up one person, throw them farther away. Midnight knocked down a few other people, whereas All Might was continuing to use his rocket launcher and take out a few others, every now and again switching to the gun when someone was too close for the rocket launcher. Soon enough, they managed to reach the house, and he said, I remember young Midori telling me about this place. This was like a Mecha battle royale of sorts. Whenever one person was defeated, they disappeared in a bright flash of light and would teleport back to their back to their house. The reason why he says that is because he told me that he was eliminated pretty early on. So you said, okay, Mike, can you tell us anything else? Young Medora also told me that about that weird person with that power, but I have a feeling that these are the same people he was talking about to me earlier. Okay, so anyone else have a sneaking suspicion about the mechs? They each looked down at their wrist and noticed there was a bracelet on them. They tapped on it, and each of them had their own personalized mech. Midnight had hers, so she ran outside and pressed it. A mech summoned in front of her. She climbed on in, and she realized it had a few ports on it that allowed her to release her quirk. But this mech was a lot more potent. You see, she found this out as soon as she climbed into her mech. Another one appeared that resembled someone like a knight in armor, came at her and launched a few sword slashes at her. She was paralyzed for a second, but then immediately released her quirk, and the person was actually paralyzed themselves. And eventually, she managed to get closer forward. She realized the mech's hands were not hands, but swords, so she used them and sliced the mech to pieces, destroying it. But she saw someone eject from the mech. Suyu and her own new mech started following them, and eventually she found them, pointed her gun at them, and shot them. The acid from it killed the player without even doubting them. All Might was close on their heels, realizing that his own mech hasn't loaded yet. He clicked on something that caught his eye, and it picked up an inventory of sorts. He pressed on something that he found a little interesting, and when it plopped into his hands out of nowhere, he started to fiddle with it while running, but he slowed down to a walk in order not to trip. As soon as he tapped and swiped it, it erupted into something looked like binary code, and his bracelet that was still loading his mech started to speed up. It also noted moderate resource area below it. He continued to run around, eventually catching up to Midnight and Ochako. He then summoned his mech, and he somehow knew it was called the United Smasher. As soon as he climbed in, another mech that bared a similar build of his own came in around and started boosting towards him on all three of them. Midnight released her quirk, but the mech simply evaded it. It was a big and hulking mech, yes, but somehow it was able to move out of the way. All Might proceeded to use a United States of Smash attack on it, and it got blown back a few feet. Suyu then leapt up into the air, jumped off a few buildings, and then desummoned her own mech, and used a gun she found in a case nearby, and started shooting at the mech to take it out. The mech looked up and proceeded to jump and walk its way towards her. All Might and Midnight were working together to take out the mech, but the armor of the mech was hard to pierce. Suyu managed to finally shoot the person out of the mech, and the mech was destroyed. She saw the person was sent flying, and so she decided to use her frog abilities and jump after them. She jumped from building top to building top like Spider-Man did, because she remembered when she was in America temporarily she saw someone with a spider-like quirk known as Spider-Man flinging from rooftop to rooftop. She used this ability she used her tongue to do this. That and her ability to stick to walls. She eventually found her way to the rooftop with nearest to where the person was. She managed to get up and close to them and start punching and kicking. The person started to dodge and pulled out the gun and started shooting her point blank range. She got hit a few times, but she managed to evade enough not to get that severely damaged. She found a piece of armor nearby that was green. She put it on and it was that of a chest piece. It was like a hologram, but it soon enough disappeared. She then went back in and picked up her own gun and sniped him a few times, eventually downing him. She then proceeded to run at him and kick his head in. This eliminated him, and when he disappeared, he left behind a case, similar to the case she saw earlier. She opened it up and saw that it had a piece of purple and 2 pieces of blue armor. She put these on and realized they were significantly stronger than the green one. And she also found that the green gun she had picked up earlier was weaker than the blue gun the guy was using. She then grabbed the gun and a few others because she realized her inventory could only hold 3 in total. She then went back out and found another enemy. She then proceeded to use the shotgun the guy had, which was a golden-like color when she found it in the chest. But she just shrugged it off and she proceeded to blast the guy with it because he was close but not close enough for her to use her martial arts on him. But one shot and the guy was down. This one it was a little shocking to her, but then she managed to use her tongue, wrap him up, and fling him into the wall. She called it a him, but for all she knew, it could be a male. It just looked female. Sorry, she could figure it was a male because of the outfit and the way he looked, and also the way he spoke when he was downed. She let out a sigh of relief, and she decided to resummon her mech. And it's a good thing she did, because soon enough, she realized she found herself cornered by 2 more people. All Might and Midnight were still around 5 blocks away. She could see them, but they were not getting fast enough. But soon enough, she saw a mech with pink horns coming towards her. The person in the mech was a good friend of Froppy, aka Suyuasui, or Sue, and this person was Mina Ashido, a classmate of hers who has the ability of acid, although it has changed her outward appearance to that of a pink humanoid with horns, black eyes, and a yellow iris, and a black pupil. This doesn't let Mina get down though. She's actually more like one of the more chipper people in Class 1A. But her mech was designed after her fighting style, and was also very flexible, which, funny enough, does help a lot more than you'd think. Mina's mech, when she deformed in front of Froppy, and Froppy did the same, she explained that her mech, it says something about it being a hit and run type, but also a continuous ability type as well. Soon enough, All Might and Midnight managed to come in and talk to Mina about what she is going on and informing her what's actually going on. Mina thought this was just some type of sick prank that Nezu was playing. Turns out Nezu was actually in the game. Well, from what they knew, it was a game. Because of the voice they heard earlier saying, "Y'all have been selected to play a game," or something along those lines. They remembered Izuku telling them something about that, a voice he's heard before, but hasn't heard since, and back when he was a vigilante, disappeared for a few minutes, maybe a few hours, for all he knew. But he was still out there, out in this battlefield, knowing this place really well. Soon enough, though, a train stopped in front of them. They got on and it took off again after a few minutes. But before then, they had 3 encounters. One with a group of people, a group of players, and they easily eliminated this group. And although they encountered a mech, this mech was very similar to the one Mina had told them about, she saw earlier. And Midnight said that she saw a mech similar to it as well. Just looks like it was redesigned, had like a different skin or something. It was, but they soon found out to be the Arthur known as Mech. The mech known as Arthur. Mina said, which Suyu soon corrected. And Mina said, "Thank you, Sue." They continued to drive and talking about the encounter with the Arthur mech. Mina told them about the time she had encountered it but managed to melt the sword off of it, thus making it unable to use its stunning or paralyzing blade attack. This impressed the others because they never thought to actually break the sword, namely because it was a ranged attack and it was a pain to get close up personal to them. They soon got off at the next stop, but when they got off, they saw that the train was being pursued by a mech that was like the one that was very similar to All Might's mech. All Might told them that he found out his mech was made as a burst and heavy armor type, and Midnight was a burst and hit and run. And Suyu told them that she found out hers was a hit and run continuous, very much like Mina's. So they managed to run to some areas and evade some attacks from this mech. They managed to evade most attacks from it, and they managed to duck behind some pillars. Eventually, they each pulled out a gun and started shooting at it, although All Might pulled out his rocket launcher and shot a few missiles at it. The mech went down soon enough, but the player started flying around and landed in one of the corners on top. So they started shooting at him, but he managed to whip out a shield and a shotgun. This was something that really nearly killed them all. They each managed to evade most attacks, but few of them were down, and it was starting to get really nasty for them. That was until Yuka Ayama managed to fly in on his mech and pretty much shoot the guy to oblivion. He didn't even get down because there's 2 people they had encountered earlier, part of his team, and he was tracking them because he was still injured himself. They managed to figure this out after reading some files when they got back. They continued to run around after Yama helped them all up by healing them and giving them each some first aid, bandages, healing stuff. And he told them about his mech. It was a mech named Shiny. Well, that's what he called it. It was a snipe and hit and run type. They discussed how each of them each were powerful. Mina and Suyu were able to move around and shoot relatively easily with a lot of ammunition and very fast reload times, although they weren't as heavily armored as All Might. All Might though was very heavy, could walk quite fast, but couldn't keep up with some other ones. But his burst attacks managed to deal enough damage to make up for it. And his defenses were really high. As for Midnight, though, hers was actually by far one of the weakest ones. They had to constantly support hers because it was more or less a one that could quickly knock out a mech. But if it was gained up on by 2 or more mechs, it was going to be out for commission for a while. So they each started running around looking for more and more people and their classmates, but they couldn't really find them. They decided to open up their maps and found that they were all in groups, and they were all being in different areas. Some were like a palace-like place, others were in a flying, not really a flying thing. It was more like they were moving quickly. It was like they jumped off a cliff or something. They tried finding Izuku, but they did. He was just zipping all over the place. Eventually, they managed to find out where some classmates were nearby. As they were running, they saw a sight they were really surprised to see. A mech that was shifting in and out of visibility and sneaking up on other mechs and dealing major amounts of damage. They started running in and started to help out this somewhat supposedly friendly mech. And Mina managed to knock out a few attacks and evade some. This mech was also an Arthur one, but it had, when defeated, it had dropped all purple and 1 golden core. These each were things that boosted the mech's already stupidly powerful capabilities. These people soon realized that their mechs were designed after their quirks and also amplified them, and that they could also use their quirks. And the reason why they were using guns is because their quirks were somewhat weakened in this world, which they deduced because All Might found something weird when he was trying to go into his buff form. He could go into his buff form is the thing. He deducted that they were using some type of quirk enabling or quirk disabling thing, but for him, since he lost his quirk but only has like minor remnants of it remaining, he can use his buff form because it does actually enable him to use his quirk, and he can hold it for a long time. It's like it never went away for him. Yama pointed out that his naval laser was actually a lot easier to use. It didn't hurt him at all. They tried thinking the recovery girl was nearby and healing them, but Yama said that he checked everything, and all he could find, the closest thing to someone who could heal them was someone like, no one really there could heal them. So it couldn't be Recovery Girl. And Recovery Girl was still in the real world. Nezu, when they saw him, they heard him over a headset they didn't know they were wearing. Turns out they were each wearing an earpiece they could communicate to each other with. Well, anyways, Nezu told them that he had deduced that they were in another world. All Might said that they already figured that out, you stupid rat. Nezu said, well, the person in the mech next to you is Toru Higakure, which is the reason why she can shift and have visibility for y'all. The whole group looked at her, and Toru demon-summoned her mech, and she looked up and waved her hand and said, I'm guessing it disables or makes your quirks better. This area does. They said, yeah, we did. How? Wow. How do you know? Well, it gave me the ability to, how do you say this? Turn visible, she said as she proceeded to drop her visibility. And it showed her wearing a mech pilot suit that was skin tight. But still, she was wearing clothes. She wasn't having to be naked. She said that she somehow just knew it would work for her and nothing would happen to her clothing. She was hoping she could keep this ability, but she soon found out it was just made for people to target her easier. That's what was pointed out by Mina earlier. When Toru said that she was hoping she'd keep this ability, Mina said that, I think the person who brought us into this world just gave you that ability so it would make people easier to target you. Toru said, well, that's depressing, but I can actually see that person doing it. Soon enough, they continued to run around and looking for more and more class members. But something was off. They were encountering more and more players. Last time Izuku said that there were only around 100, but each of them looked at their own kill streaks and kill counts. Each of them had 50 at least. They deduced that these people were weaker than average humans in their world. But from what they knew, there was thousands of people all with battle knowledge here. And ability, and they had the knowledge of the terrain. Soon enough, they found a mountain area that was just crawling with robots. Toru said, I thought there wasn't any robots here. Well, look at those. Are those chests or something? Mina pulled up her own mini-map and said, according to this, those are airdrops. And those are guardians. So, come on. She said as she closed her mini-map and she jumped out of the way, pushing everyone out along with her. They're all about to say why she did that when an energy ball passed right in front of them and behind Mina. She said, that's why, pointing back to behind her. Get your quirks or guns ready, and we need to take these mechs out. They proceeded to completely and utterly annihilate every single mech that was in their way. Each one dropped some more healing, some more health kits and stuff like that. Some even dropped armor or small grade weaponry. They picked it all up, and All Might ran over to one of the airdrops and started to open it. He soon found out that it had a rocket launcher in there as well. He picked it up and he tossed it to Mina and said, Young Gashido, I think you might find this more helpful. Mina said, oh my, isn't this one yours? All Might proceeded to summon his and said, I think I know where this came from. It was an airdrop. From what you said, I'm guessing that these things can drop weaponry, armor, and stuff like that, correct? Yeah, and also according to these, she pulled out a piece of triangle that had an attack on it. These are modules. There's 4 types. There's green, blue, and purple. The green being the weakest, and the purple being the strongest, with blue being medium. And these are core modules. There's only gold in these, and these are really rare. And there's also golden weaponry, the strongest in the game, in this area anyways. I have a feeling that these rocket launchers I found are, well, not really found, but from a chest, is from an airdrop. After saying that, someone landed nearby, and a giant crash and burn. It was a mech. Kirishima was in his mech, although they didn't recognize it was Kirishima because it was pretty badly damaged. Most of the red was scraped off from the fight he was having. Him, Shoto, Ojiro, Bakugo, Mineta, and Soji were all fighting Compress. Compress had managed to marbleize Soji, Mineta, Bakugo, again, Ojiro, and Shoto all in their mech forms. Shoto, seeing that some of his teachers and some of his friends were still there, and still not fully trusting Yama because of the first year incident of him being the UA traitor, he decided to have them help him try to take on and defeat Compress. They all, after hearing what happened, after Kirishima desummoned his mech, that is, they all decided to come up with a plan, strategize, and team up and defeat them together after freeing Shoto, Ojiro, Bakugo, and Soji, and reluctantly agreeing to free Mineta. Kirishima could see why, because his girlfriend Mina was one of the many victims of Mineta's perviness. Still wanted to beat the little crap out of that little grapehead, but he learns his restraint. Decided to go for Shoto first because he was by far one of the simplest ones to free. Seeing how, in the mech form, Compress could use their quirks, weirdly enough. Because in their world, he couldn't use their quirks whatsoever. He could just only imprison them in a marble. But then again, All Might could use his buff form, which surprised Kirishima because he thought he lost that form permanently. But he soon realized that some quirks were amplified, some were weakened, and some were not even affected. He said something about Izuku's quirk not even being affected whatsoever. He was able to take out mechs by himself. This all shocked them, especially after hearing that a mech they were having trouble with dealing. The author mech barely had an effect on Izuku, even in his human form, but in his mech form, it was just downright insane. So, they proceeded to collect some other things from the airdrop hill. Every now and again, they saw a few players and proceeded to eliminate them immediately. Faster and faster each time. Soon enough, they all had at least 1 or 2 pieces of purple gear and at least 1 or 2 modules that were purple and 1 gold core for each of them. Kirishima led the charge on the idea of where Mr. Compress most likely would be, enacting some very, interesting plans. He was hoping that he could take over this world, from what he said. Shigaraki still having some of a mindset as, for one, wanted to take over a world. So Shigaraki decided to take over this world. But Ojiro had stated before being marbleized that find the others and do not let him do this. So Kirishima fought Compress even after his other friends were marbleized. He was still affected by some of Shoto's attacks, with the frost and the fire being the reason why his mech paint was actually scraped and pretty much completely off. They ran to the closest town that they found was crawling with compresses. Turns out, not really twice, but Toga was also here, and she used twice his blood to, create a mech version of him. But she more or less didn't create mech versions, but created an army of compresses to hopefully weed out the UA faculty and students in this area. Shoda pointed out that each marble had a weird glow to it. If they look closely enough, one marble had like a blue and white glow, which was undoubtedly Shoto's. Another one had a brownish glow to it, a light tan brown, which Toru spotted and said, "Isn't that Ojiro's?" Kirishima said, "Yes, that is." Bakugo's was really easy to see. It had a smoky aura with flames coming off of it, which it seemed like it was very hard for Compress to control. Manetta, it was just purple. Soji, though, it was a little more interesting for him. You see, Soji's was a very bright blue. It was shaking around violently every now and again, like he was saving his energy and trying to break out at the same time. They decided to go with Shoto's first, because Shoto is by far one of their strongest in their class. And because of his mech, it was going to be a lot easier to deal with Compress. Kirishima decided to split the group up into teams. Froppy and Midnight would team up together. All Might, Mina, and Toru would go together, with him and Yaoma teaming up together, hopefully to return some more trust with one another, especially with Kirishima and Yaoma. Each of them proceeded to sneak around and engage in battle with twice clones. Every now and again, if someone got far away and running in close, they managed to shoot and pretty much eliminate fast enough before they can get close. But Compress, they still didn't see the real one. But Kirishima, soon enough, decided to deal with a large cluster of Compress clones by activating his own mech. Hardened metal, heavy armor, and assault. He proceeded to use his hardening ability in his mech, which actually caused nanobots to form, creating weaponry and cannons. He created a chainsaw-like machine on one arm and proceeded to down multiple Compress clones in an instant, and using his cannon, blasting them to pretty much dust, or more like a mud. With Yaoma nearby, using his naval laser to deal with a bunch of other clones that were nearby. Some were getting close enough to nearly touch him, which he managed to dodge because he knew about their quirks. He knew about all the League's quirks and what each of them could do. Their fighting styles, which is one of the major reasons why Kirishima wanted on his team. He didn't have that much knowledge of each fighting style, but with the help of Yaoma, it should be simpler to take them out. And he was right. Each clone was using the same fighting style. Some were, surprisingly enough, actual players coming in and actually using guns to take out these twice clones too. But whenever they could, they would use a cheap shot to try to shoot out Kirishima's mech or Yaoma. And whenever this happened, Yaoma would always activate his own mech, and whichever guy was close enough, he would proceed to douse with a laser beam to the face. His mech had multiple lasers in multiple areas. One on each shoulder, one on the central, one on around his waist, and 2 for cannon arms. Nearby, he saw Toru shifting in and out of invisibility and sneaking up on multiple Compress clones at a time in her mech form and her human form, switching them between them every 7-10 seconds, which he found to be the cooldown time for each mech summon. And she was completely eliminated this group really quickly. But for some reason, these things just kept coming every now and again. Like a new wave was resummoned. It was starting to get a little annoying for her. And pretty much annoying for all of them. So they decided to go ahead and attack the compress they figured was hosting Shoto's quirk, and they were right. As soon as they defeated it, found the marble and crushed it, Shoto was released. Oh, what happened? Shoto said. Ojiro, we need to get Ojiro. Kirishima said, whoa, calm down. Why do we need to get Ojiro? He has an idea of how to deal with and how to find the other LOV members that were here. How do you know this? Toru said. Yeah, Mina said. Young Todoroki, I would also like to know how. He said that before he was marbleized, he said that he knew how to stop them and how to deal with them. I was kind of confused on how he knew how to deal with them, but I decided not to question him and go along with it, and we were right to do so. Why is that, young Todoroki? It's like he had intimate knowledge of them, and how to fight them, and how to defeat them. Almost as if he was the betrayer this time. Well, that can't be it, Moma said. Yama, why is that? Because I was the only UA trader, and I never had a partner. Maybe he had heard them talking. Weird, it's always a closed channel. Wait, Nezu. Nezu might have been able to inform Ojiro, because wasn't Ojiro the closest to Nezu before we were summoned? Yeah, he was. So Nezu, being the smart little rat thing he is, he might have been able to tap into the wavelengths of the villain's communications. Meaning he might have been able to get an idea of their attack plans. All Might said. Yeah, that's a good point. We never had an idea. Maybe he informed Ojiro of how to deal with them. That's literally the only reason why I can think of, Todoroki said. He also said something about trust Yama more than most others. No clue why he said that, because Yama, well, you know. I was the age trader, don't rub it in, we know. Yeah, but this time it was like, you were the only reason why we'll be able to win this fight. I have no idea why that is. Neither do I, said Kirishima and Yama. But anyways, let's deal with the rest of these compress clones. They proceed to run around and eliminate more and more compress clones. Every now and again, spotting some that would run back, start running away. And right before they managed to down it, they would pass out a marble to the next one. Kirishima started chasing one that was carrying a marble that had a reddish hue to it. They identified as Bakugo's marble. Toru started chasing one that was carrying Ojiro's marble. So Kirishima and Shoto decided to tell everyone to split up half with half with Toru, half with Kirishima, in order to make sure none of them get ambushed or eliminated. If only that was what happened. Toru was too far ahead. She was running farther ahead than any of the others. So she was hoping to actually get up and catch up to the Twice clone that had her boyfriend's marble. But when she was close enough, the compress clone disintegrated after tossing the marble up into the air. And a mech that looked like a Mecha version with some alterations of Mr. Compress. He proceeded to shoot something at her, and it encased her in a marble, locking her instead. So the second group that was going to follow Toru, seeing her get eliminated, well, captured, more like it, by Compress, they decided to run back with the other group to hopefully rescue Bakugo. Kirishima was getting closer and closer to Bakugo, well, to the compress clone that was carrying Bakugo's marble. He managed to get up and close to it and destroy, and whip out a gun and managed to put a bullet right between the clone's eyes, which dropped, and as the marble rolled towards him, another compress clone came out of a house and started jumbling towards the other marble. Trying to scoop it up and run. But Kirishima, who was nearby, Shoto, who was nearby, used his fire and completely and utterly eviscerated the Twice clone. I think we can get Bakugo back now, Shoto said while looking at Kirishima. Also, never again run off like that. Shoto then proceeded to summon more ice and used his fire to ignite him like propulsion, and it got sent flying forwards. Okay, this is going to be a fun part, Kirishima said, while he proceeded to crush the marble underneath his foot. And as soon as he removed it, a bright red glow started to form, and Bakugo was soon on the ground, and got up and said, "Where's that trench coat wearing motherfucker at?" Kirishima said, Whoa, calm down, Bakugo, bro. What do you want, crappy hair? Bakugo said. We have pretty much the same hair. Listen, you were captured by a villain. Yeah, I was, Bakugo said. And of course it appears you actually reverted back to your old attitude. What'd you say, crappy hair? Nothing, Bakugo. Come on, we need to get with the others. Fine, but whenever we find this stupid villain, I call dibs on blowing his arse up first. Yeah, whatever you want, Bakugo. Let's get back to All Might. Okay. And there's my little Pomeranian back. What'd you say? Nothing. The little gay couple decided to walk back to the group. Mina was nearby dealing with more compress clones and starting to eliminate them faster and faster, using her mech every now and again to use its acid and melt them completely, and also using the spikes on one arm to chop right through some. Every now and again, a player sometimes appears at a window and starts shooting at her, which she proceeded to shoot a large amount of acid at them. It downed them, but soon enough, a compress clone came and eliminated them. How many more complex clones are we going to have to deal with? No clue, Bakugo. Can you use your landmine to hopefully disrupt this area? Yeah, sure. Tell everyone to get out of the way first. Kirishima got on top of a roof, using his mech, and flying up to it and said, "Everyone, get out of this area!" All the heroes and faculty members and heroes in training all bolted to the hill, because as soon as they saw Bakugo. Bakugo summoned his own mech and plugged it directly into the ground, plugged one can directly into the ground, and proceeded to plug the other can directly beside it. He let off a ginormous explosion which completely eviscerated and caused a small earthquake which was felt halfway across the map. Compress, who was riding away, felt the shake and looked back and saw smoke starting to rise. He said to himself, "Let's just hope Toga's idea works out." And he started running back once again. Okay, now that's dealt with. Who's next? "I guess it will be me," said Minetto, walking out of the smoke. "I thought a Compress clone had you." "Well, you see, the Compress clone that had me was in this area, and when you used your landmine attack, it completely eviscerated him, which shattered my marble. I can still feel the fervent writing from you, little creep. Whatever, Bakugo." Minetto started drooling while looking at Minetto's costume, which was torn a little. Tsuyu proceeded to use her tongue, slap him, wrap it around him, and proceeded to fling him up the hill a lot more. Minetto said, "Thank you, Hasui. I told you to call me Sue, Ribbit." "Okay, Sue, thank you for doing that, though. I'm surprised the little guy's still a hero in training." "Young Minetto needs to learn to quit being such a pervert," All Might said. Everyone, we need to get up to mount the hill more so we can get to higher ground and hopefully find more people. They proceeded to trudge up the hill, and when they looked down, they saw Toru and Ojiro running out of the smoke with their wrapping bandages on each other. Mina said, "I had totally forgotten they were in there." When Toru got close enough, she shouted, "What was that about, guys?" Of course, it was an explosive Pomeranian. "What'd you say, there's a freak?" Ojiro proceeded to round the hill a lot faster, and proceeded to smack Bakugo across the face, sending him flying a few feet with his tail, and said, "You do not call my girlfriend a freak, you Pomeranian." "Oh, you want to fight me, huh, then?" Kirishima managed to get between Ojiro and Bakugo before he retorted, "Yes, I do. You do not call her a freak. She is a beautiful young lady." To this, Toru started to blush, and Mina said, "Ho, interesting." Midnight said, "Now's not the time, Toru. Not the time, Mina. When is it the time for tea? We need to find Soji," Ojiro said. "Oh, that multi-armed freak. Say that again about one of my friends. I will slap your face with my tail so hard your head will be the only thing intact." "How would that work?" "You know what, screw it." Ojiro then proceeded to use his tail and hit Katsuki directly in the balls, which caused Katsuki to double over in pain. And he said, "That was a cheap shot," before passing out. Kirishima said, "Ojiro, that was not very manly, but thank you. My little Pomeranian was starting to get on my own nerves." Ojiro said, "Keep Baku Bottom under control." Kirishima started to blush a little after hearing Ojiro call him Baku Bottom, which, funny enough, was because Bakugo was actually at the bottom of the relationship. Mina was about to say T before Kirishima shot a gaze at her and said, "Mina, save it for later." Mina reluctantly agreed to save it for later. So they proceeded to run up the hill more, and eventually finding Mineta tied up in a little fight between 5 players, all in mechs that were similar to one another. One was in a mech that was relatively slender but had 2 balls floating around them that shoot electricity. One was in a mech known as Arthur. One was in a jet mech they encountered later on. They learned known as Hurricane. One was the one that was similar to All Might, and another one they never saw before. One that had big legs, had something like a police car coloring to it. And Mineta proceeded to summon its own mech and stick him to the ground. Soon enough, Mineta managed to stick them all down, and each of the other Class 1A members that were nearby managed to run in and start dismantling their rope, start dismantling the mechs. Mineta kept shooting them whenever one of his balls weared off, sticking the mech back down to the ground. Soon enough, all the mechs were destroyed, and all the pilots were scattering. But turns out they decided to become a group and team up with one another. They started to fly down in one area near a mech. They looked and saw that the mech was looked very similar to Soji. They decided that this could possibly be Soji and his mech. So they decided to run for it and see if that was him. Once they got there, they were severely beaten and battered because they had dealt with hundreds, if not a few hundred more players, and each attack was getting more and more brutal, but also having to deal with some clones of their own friends. They were starting to get very worn out and tired. And when they finally reached up to Soji, they found him already surrounded by at least 15 chests. All of them had been opened, only with about 5 unopened. He desummoned his mech after seeing them, ran over and each of his arms, he gave each of them 2 healing kits. Told them to heal up and grab some weaponry from the chests. They ran over and grabbed better weaponry. Some grabbed machine guns that were purple gear. Mina found one that was a rainbow tier, and Toru found a shotgun that was a shield from an enemy they saw earlier on. She grabbed these, and it was a good thing too, because she also found a hoverboard which she used and proceeded to float around on for a few good minutes while eliminating some of the players that were nearby. She was trying to figure out how these people were coming and coming. Turns out they later found the reason. While looking around, they found an area inside a building that looked like a respawn center. Reason being is because in glowing red jagged lettering, it said respawn center. Next group respawning in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And 10 players they just previously killed were back out it again, and which they proceeded to eliminate really quickly this time because they literally had little to no weaponry. They then proceeded to actually destroy this area in hopes this would actually chop it down and stop the stupid amount of enemies they were having to face. They soon heard a voice and said, "Well, it appears that y'all finally found one of my 5 respawn centers. This would be the reason why you're having such a hard time defeating this game. Y'all would have to defeat every single last enemy, including y'all's enemies, who y'all call the League of Villains, before y'all can even think about going home, because my enjoyment has only just begun." If this stupid little rat thing didn't figure out the deal I made with the villains, this would be a lot easier. I forgot to turn off the mic. Shoto looked at Kirishima, Midnight looked at All Might, everyone else looked at everyone else, and they were all saying the same thing. They each said, "She made a deal with the villains." This mysterious female voice proceeded to come back on and say, "Oh, well, y'all can hear whatever y'all want. I'm just going to erase y'all's memories anyways." This made them decide to quickly end this match faster than they planned. We now transfer over to the point of view of Compress. Compress thought to himself, "Come on, where are you, Toga? I have been waiting here for 5 minutes. Soon enough, a ginormous, muscular mech of sorts jumped beside him, and it deformed directly into someone who was around half its size. When can I finally see some blood?" "No clue, muscular. I still want to beat that kid named Dick. He was one of the only people who can give me a good fight. I want payback." "You'll have your payback sooner rather than later. And we just need to wait for Toga to come here. That's all we need." He was shot through the head and eliminated from the game. What just happened? Muscular looked around and eventually looked down. He saw the Class 1A students from earlier scattering around, trying to find a way up to Muscular. Eventually, All Might summoned his own mech and started to leap up, and managed to start scaling the wall. Sui was close behind him, using her own mech's ability to climb walls a lot faster. Muscular proceeded to jump down and land directly on top of it, of All Might's, pushing it further down, crashing into the street below. Midnight proceeded to try to use her quirk and knock her out. This, although, didn't really work for her. She was pushed and flung into a building. This caused her to be knocked down to pretty much 5 HP. She decided to run into the building to heal up. Muscular was about to run in after her to hopefully see some real blood for once, but he didn't get the chance to. Reason why was because the others were hot on his tail. He was soon surrounded by the Class 1A. Well, the ones that have met up with one another thus far. Each one were breathing heavily because of the multiple compress clones they were having to deal with still, and other players. Let's just hope you can give me a good fight. Muscular proceeded to wrap his body in muscles and started leaping towards them. Well, he lunged towards them. Mina summoned her own mech and started spraying him with acid. The acid was melting through his muscle fibers very quickly, but not quick enough. Not as quick as it could because he was starting to heal more and more fast. Heal faster and faster each time, and eventually his muscles were starting to grow more and more. He got on top of her and ripped her mecha to shreds. Eventually, she decided it was completely destroyed. The cooldown time was 1 minute or so for it to be resummoned. He proceeded to start wailing on her and said, "Show me your blood!" before Katsuki proceeded to blast him in the face, knocking out the fake prosthetic guy he had already placed in earlier. This really ticked him off, so he started to lunge towards Bakugo, but he was met with a spiky, rock-hard arm instead. Kirishima's arm, to be more accurate. Kirishima was in his base form, not his unbreakable. This made Muscular very impressed, and he proceeded to try and punch harder, but Kirishima was just standing there, taking the brunt of it. Eventually, Muscular summoned his own mech, and you can't really tell, but you can sense that he was smirking. And he said, "Let's see how well you take a punch from this thing," and proceeded to summon a jet out of his arm and punch Kirishima right in the gut. The punch sent Kirishima flying into a wall and knocking him down. He got right back up and looked square in Muscular's face. He said, "I've trained, and I have met people that hit harder than that," and proceeded to leap towards him once again, this time in his own mech. He summoned the saw from earlier, but hardened it to that of a blade, and proceeded to bring it down on top of one of Muscular's arms. And although it was relatively heavily armored, it didn't stop him from hardening his other hand and proceeding to drill it into a nasty uppercut into Muscular's lower jaw. This sent Muscular's mech flying, careening upwards, and then Katsuki, using his own mech, he started flying up, and he proceeded to use one cannon pointing upwards and one downwards to propel himself downwards, and right before they hit the ground, he used the other one, plunged it directly in Muscular's mech's face, and blasted the head clean off. This caused the mech to destabilize and desummon. Muscular was really impressed that both of them managed to work together and take him down, and his mech of all things. He started going crazy. "Finally, someone that can beat me without those two. This should be fun. Let's see." Ugh. Muscular passed out before he could say anything else. Midnight looked up, wrapping some bandages around her arm, and said, "Did I get him?" Good job, Midnight. Yeah. Okay, that was a close one. Decided to just take a break real quick with Midnight, with constantly using her quirk on Muscular, trying to make sure he stays down. It was working for a while. They decided to keep an eye out, just keep one person's eye out, just in case someone decided to come in and attack them while they were resting. Their legs were killing them, and Kirishima decided to take first watch. He summoned his mech and decided to do something with Muscular. He took Muscular and grabbed a telephone pole and wrapped it around him. With the help of Mina, he made a contraption that would dump acid on him if he decided to wake up and try and attack anyone. And after that, Kirishima started walking around on a block perimeter, deciding to look around to see if there's anyone nearby. Little did he know there was someone in buildings. As he was walking down one way, he heard the sound of steps, and a proximity alarm as Mac went off. He looked around and he saw a player running directly towards where they set up camp for a little bit. He decided to turn around and shoot a cannon blast at him. This caused the player to be knocked down. He then shot them again, and it defeated the opponent. He then decided to look to see where he came from, where the person had played came from. He desummoned his mech and walked into the building. And when he walked in, he saw another respawn center. He rushed out and started running back towards the base when he heard a loud "Ah!" It was Muscular's voice. He started running faster and found Muscular with a can on top of his head, burning. Mina was already nearby, starting to create more acid just in case he managed to break free of his bindings. Kirishima summoned his mech, and right as Muscular started to break through his bindings, Kirishima lunged towards and chopped his head right off. Right as Muscular took the helmet off his head and looked directly at him with a wide-eye expression. Everyone started freaking out, but after a few seconds, everything came to a screeching halt when they realized that it was just Kirishima didn't really just kill him, it was more like an avatar. When they realized this, it was because they remembered everything else they had killed. All the other players, they never bled. It was like they were just a regular avatar. If anything, they might have been human, but like a digital version of them, to say the least. This comforted them, knowing that they didn't really kill anyone. And if they did really kill anyone, it was in self-defense. Muscular, though, was an exception. He had a kill order on him for a while. They just preferred to make sure he doesn't die. But Kirishima, seeing how Muscular had caused so much damage to families, he decided to put an end to him, hopefully. Nezu was nearby and started walking towards the group. He clapped his hands and said, "Well, I am really impressed y'all managed to take him down. Especially you, Kirishima. Principal Nezu, where were you?" "Around. I was also using my intellect to try and figure out a way to counter every single villain here." "Of course you are. You're a conniving little rat, aren't you?" Midnight said. "I heard that, Midnight. And yes, I know I am. And I love it." "Well, I'm surprised you're still principal, little rathead. Hey, I can easily have your pay docked and you arrested." "Try me," Midnight said while about to rip some of her own suit off. Nezu put his hands up in defeat and said, "You win. That's a first." "Okay, shut up, please. Okay, any information? Like, how exactly did you know the League of Villains were making a plan to beat us?" "Well, isn't it simple? Think about it. How else did someone create a plan? Well, why else would they create a plan to defeat us? They wanted to take over a world, so why not take over one that has endless amounts of people to defeat?" Kirishima finally cut in and said, "Guys, I found another respawn center." "Ah, young Kirishima. Of course you have. And where is it exactly?" "It's down the street. Come on, let's go." Everyone got up and started running. Nezu was soon picked up by All Might and was led there too. He then, and once they reached it, Nezu looked up and said, "My oh my, this is really interesting." "What do you mean, Nezu?" "This is a respawn mechanic for sure, but it's definitely like we're in a game of sorts." "And how many of these did that woman say was around here?" "5 total. Have you destroyed any?" "Well, seeing how I am by myself, until I ran into the group of students earlier, I have only really defeated one. Or destroyed one myself." "Okay, so that's one for y'all. There's only 2 remaining after this one. So let's destroy it, shall we?" Nezu said, as he summoned his mech, which was about the size of one of the smaller mechs they had seen earlier, that was called Neutron Star. He proceeded to look around for a second, and then proceeded to let off 2 shots, which started to bounce around and destroy multiple things. Nezu started laughing. Shota said, "Of course you calculated how to only use 2 shots and destroy pretty much everything here." "Well, my mech wouldn't be called Think Ahead if it wasn't for anything. If it wasn't for that. Also because you're a quirk, which increases your IQ." Yes, it does. Anyways, let's move on, shall we?" After Nezu said, "Let's go," they left the area they were in. They soon started wandering around, and they soon realized that they had spent time running towards the center unintentionally. And when they turned around, they saw a wall of yellow hot on their trail. They decided to down a player and see what would happen. And from what Nezu could figure out, these players were artificial intelligence, meaning they weren't really human, so they were fine with it. And just like Nezu hypothesized earlier on, it was a storm that continued to damage the people in it until they got out or they died. And for this player, they died. They continued to run back towards the storm, away from the storm, because it was a green chest. They didn't have anything good on them. And as they were running, they saw 2 mechs clashing with one another. One was very similar to the other, except this one had 2 of the same modules, like parts, as the other one they were facing. And when the one with the bigger legs of the 2 launched its own attack, it resembled something like a bird being launched at them. The person in the other mech activated their own mech's abilities, and it completely dismantled what was flying towards them. The attack rerouted and started flying right back towards the mech and reassembled back into the shoulder. It then brought up its own cannon and shot a few times. The person in the mech decided that to retreat, fall back, and hope to get a better shot off from a distance. The mech looked away and deactivated, but not before shooting its own attack towards the mech. What happened was each pillar sprung out 15 feet and then ejected, and a middle piece launched another 30 feet and then to a 45-foot, which pierced and wrapped around the other mech, damaging it. And when they finally got pulled enough, the mech was met to the face with a fist and then to the gut with a cannon blast that dismantled it. And the pilot was launched into the air, but the person immediately erased it and they fell to their death. The player wasn't down because this person has already defeated them all. Then the person turned around and dismantled their mech, showing that it was a racer head. He looked towards his students and says, "Where's the other brats?" The class that was there ran over and hugged Eraser before he punched them all in the head and said, "Answer the question, where are there detention for all of y'all?" They said they had no idea where the others were. Nezu said that he had saw a group of them earlier, and they should be around a few blocks up north, and right on cue, they saw a weirdly black something that resembled the shadows and followed by a ginormous electrical shock, followed by a few giant explosions of blue flames. The blue flames made Shoto scared. "I thought I killed him," it was all Shoto said. Kirishima realized what he was talking about. How can Dobby be alive? I don't remember, but if I remember, y'all told me, or whoever's been there told me, that they saw Shoto here completely eviscerate Dobby. He was dead. He was burnt to a crisp, burnt more than he usually was. Can only hope. Soon another mech came flying backwards out of the area. The mech that came flying outwards resembled that of a animal of sorts. The ears at the very least, it resembled that of cat ears, which most likely gave the pilot of the mech better senses of hearing of their surroundings. The mech got up and looked directly at the class and started rushing towards them. They all got into attack group formation, waiting for an attack that actually never really came. This is because when the mech was desummoned, it revealed it was Koda coming in. He panicked and said, "Dobby, don't know how. Over there, fighting Dinky and Tokiyami," before passing out. Koda must have been scared out of his wits in order to form senses like that in front of us without stuttering. He must have really. Nezu said, "Okay, All Might, you, me, and Aizawa and Midnight will stay here and protect Koda because he's out like a light. The other students will go in and deal with them." Aizawa said, "That is suicide." Nezu said, "And I'm the principal, and I've seen these students take out hundreds, if not thousands, or a few hundred of these bloody players, which are AI. They have been programmed to kill on sight and be adaptable. They have completely eviscerated and torn through these things like the wet paper. They can handle Dobby." Shoto got up and said, "I'll go by myself." Everyone was shocked at this, but they soon figured that they might as well let Dobby go by himself like he wanted. But they decided to send in a few people as well, just in case things got, hairy. They secretly sent in Kirishima, Bakugo, and The fastest one out of them, Suyu, for reconnaissance and to make sure Bakugo doesn't do anything stupid, especially that last part. Suyu activated her mech and camouflaged it to the surroundings. She then leapt onto a wall, followed by Bakugo and Kirishima running into a building and shooting up the glass just in case they needed to start firing. Shoto walked in, and beside Dobby was hundreds of Dobby clones. He decided to wipe them out faster, but as soon as he activated his quirk, they all activated theirs, and he decided to call out Bakugo and Kirishima because he knew they were there, not Froppy. After being called out, Bakugo said, "Icy-Hot, how did you know we were here?" It's your fiery attitude that gives it away. Also, the fact that you literally cannot shut up even when you are quiet. Why, you little... Kirishima cut off Bakugo by putting his hand over his mouth. Sorry, Bro. Let's just deal with these people. Gesturing and referring to the hundreds of thousands, if not thousands, correction, of Twice clones, all with their quirks ready. They all proceeded to just leap into the battle. All the Dobby clones were fairly weak, but just because they were physically weak in defense doesn't mean they weren't physically strong. The three of them managed to knock out a few before eventually being overwhelmed, but they were saved by Froppy jumping down and crushing a good chunk of them that were in their way pretty much to dust and mud. So the others proceeded to summon their own mechs. All of them were able to knock out a few hundred more clones. They soon saw someone with a crow head they recognized as Tokiyami running out of a store carrying a rocket launcher. He then jumped up and landed on top of a car and shot directly at a Dobby clone, which completely eviscerated around 20 more in that surrounding area. He then proceeded to summon his own mech, which resembled his real head, but his feet, but it didn't represent his quirk all that well. But it was a continuous and assault type, which made sense because of the following. He then proceeded to use his two cannons to summon darkness and completely eviscerate and puppeteer the other Dobby clones, that is, to pretty much they were just wiped out. All the Dobby clones were soon gone, and the one Dobby remaining, which Shoto had identified as the real one by punching him earlier and then retreated back into the crowd, was missing. He heard a gunfire go off, and they started off to run and investigate. They soon saw Dobby in a 1v1 match up against another AI, and Tokiyami decided to take this chance and fire at Dobby, I mean. But Dobby saw this attack coming and managed to jump out of the way and caused Tokiyami to completely eviscerate and eliminate and kill the AI avatar that was in Dobby's way. Dobby then proceeded to thank him by igniting his hand and giving him the middle finger and throw a flash fire fist at him, which nearly burned up everyone in there. The only reason why they survived is because Shoto made them duck into a store which he closed off with ice, and also proceeded to encase Tokiyami's mechanize. But when he defrosted a way out and defrosted Tokiyami's mech, the mech was gone and Tokiyami was on the ground. He said while shivering, "Never do that again unless it's really needed." Yeah, let's deal with that later and deal with these guys first. He said as a group of at least 5 more mechs came in. Each of them were the same. All Arthur. Okay. I remember seeing a respawn thing earlier. That should be 4. What? There was 5. We destroyed 3. Let's get this last one. The group of them, Shoto, Kirishima, Bakugo, Froppy, and now Tokiyami, proceeded to rush towards the location of the mechs, and Tokiyami pulled out his rocket launcher and shot it a few times, damaging one mech. The others were starting to be fired upon, and slashes were being flashed at them. They managed to dodge each of these attacks, and eventually they reached the mechs. They proceeded to summon their own mechs to right in front of them. Tsuyu kicked one in the face, sending it careening backwards, and used her tongue, and then slammed it into a wall and shot one of her acid balls at it, which proceeded to eliminate the mech. The player tried getting away, but Tsuyu used her mech's tongue and wrapped them up and tossed them into a building, eliminating them. Similar things happened to the others, with Kirishima completely eviscerating his mech, a target, and the actual guy. Tokiyami used his shadow abilities to crush the mech like a tin can, killing the AI avatar inside. Bakugo, same thing as Tokiyami, but completely blew the thing up. And finally, Sho just froze the thing solid and then melted it out. But the player was already downed because of the damage sustained from the explosion of the mech, from the other mechs being destroyed. Then they turned to look for where their respawn center was. After running around and eliminating a few players, they came across a larger group of around at least 10 or so. Each of them were using the hot steel mech. And these were by far one of the simpler times they managed to destroy them. But every now and again they would get their own mech severely damaged. They kept on firing on them even when they were not in their mechs. They also managed to deal with some of the other more nasty ones while this was going on. What I mean by that is some of the more nasty mechs that would take them out a lot faster. Mechs like Gabriel and stuff like that. Especially the sniping mechs, which were one of the biggest pains that they had to deal with while fighting. They soon came across the respawn center with Dinky Kaminari there. They didn't realize that this Dinky wasn't the real Dinky. He was actually guarding it when he should have been destroying it. You see, Nezu, after figuring this out, had also sent the other kids out He also sent a message to any students that if they came across a respawn center to destroy it. They were thinking that maybe Dinky was waiting for them, but Dinky, as soon as they got closer to him, like 5 feet in front of him, he immediately leapt at them and used his quirk and tried to harm them. Shoto sidestepped out of the way and used fire and roasted Dinky, but Dinky managed to dodge. He then used his own quirk again, although he wasn't going to a yay mode. But it also appeared that he was getting weaker. And as soon as he punched him with an ice fist, with a fist encased in ice, Dinky erupted into mud. They looked around and couldn't find the real Dinky at all. Katsuki said, "You gotta be kidding me, we're finding a Twice clone. How the frick is Twice alive? We thought he was dead." "You forget about Toga." "Fair enough. So, who exactly we're gonna deal with this time?" "Well, what I mean is, as in, who's gonna deal with the respawn center and the players that are coming in right about now?" A huge flash of light appeared, and a bunch of angry AI looked up and saw this group of students and just started to rush at them. There was around at least 50 or 100 of them. The Class 1A charged in with their weapons at the ready, but somehow these guys were respawned in with better gear than they had. Some had rocket launchers and others had ion cannons. The students were getting down left and right. They soon heard clanging coming from the outside, and they looked back and saw a mech running outside and pointing a cannon directly in. They decided to duck behind a wall that was nearby, and good thing they did, because as soon as they did, the mech released a torrent of electricity which roasted every single AI in there. Then the mech proceeded to shut down, and the person inside, who was Dinky Kaminari, used his quirk on some other people that are outside and proceeded to go into a yay mode. "Found Dunce Face." "Yeah, okay, when he gets back, we need to ask him where he was." After around 5 minutes or so, Dinky finally regained his composure, and Shoto asked, "Dinky, where were you? We fought a Twice clone of you." I was, how do you say this, in this area before I was knocked out with a gunshot to the back of my leg. Somehow they managed to make me feel pain, even though I'm guessing y'all don't feel pain." "That is correct." And then a loud voice came over our system and said, "Well, this is unprecedented. Y'all have destroyed all but one respawn center. Y'all even managed to destroy the people, the AIs, might I say, that were having the best gear in the game. I am by thoroughly impressed with all of y'all. But let's see how y'all deal with some of the more nasty villains, shall we?" The group looked at one another and then looked up. They saw Dobby standing on top of the roof, looking down at them with a smirk. He then ran into the building. Dobby had somehow managed to find Kirishima earlier, but he wasn't attacking them. It was like he was luring them. Shoto recognized this attack and told everyone to be on their guard because he thought that it was going to be a trap, which he was later right about. As they were walking in, doors started shutting around them with no real cause. Torber said, "Ow, what was that?" and then she was down and grappled. She found herself on the floor with her attacker not being able to be seen. Bakugo proceeded to left an explosion right on top of her. Mina tried to stop him, but she wasn't able to because the person who was on top of her was Toga. Toga said, I should have gotten more blood. But oh well, let's wait till next time. She proceeded to go back invisible and leave this building. The only reason why they could tell she left was because of some proximity alarms that went off nearby. And also they heard screaming coming from a bunch of AIs. Okay, I'm really scared that Toga can make us feel pain. Yeah, is that part of Mecha abilities or something? No, it can't be. Ojiro said, we can't feel pain in this world. Well, on our avatars, that is. But I'm pretty sure our real bodies can. What makes you say these are our real bodies? What I'm saying is, Katsuki, please get your Pomeranian under control. What I'm saying is that we could possibly have our minds in this world. Our minds don't feel pain because they're just a bunch of, what was that? They're a bunch of nerves with no pain receptors whatsoever. So pretty much anyone can poke a brain and it doesn't hurt whatsoever, correct? Yes, that is. Remind me again why I'm not surprised. You are one of the smartest in class. Of course you know that. Let's just try to find a way out of here. They started walking up the steps to the next layer, looking for Dobby, who was in this building. They heard a crash coming from a window coming up from the other stairs. They bolted up the stairs and got to the next level faster. They looked around and were on the 3rd floor. They looked and they saw Dobby looking at them, and then he jumped out the window and used his fire to propel himself across the river that was nearby. The fire wasn't able to reach Class 1A because they were able to duck behind a wall that was down the wall of the stairs that just came up. But the fire had scorched pretty much everything else, and they could just feel the heat coming from it. Which was weird because they shouldn't be able to feel it. It was like the villains had the ability to make them feel pain, but they couldn't feel pain or make anyone else feel pain. This was just starting to confuse them more and more. So they got up and looked over, and they decided to have someone pull out some snipers. It was Dobby versus the group. Toru, Mina, and Shoto each got up their guns and proceeded to shoot sniper bullets directly towards Dobby. He evaded most of them and had to melt a few. They got a few headshots in before he could heal up. Shoto then leapt out the building, landed on the ground, summoned his own mech, and proceeded to douse Dobby in flames and ice. This encased him, and a voice came over and said, "What an astonishing turn of events! The villains are down to only 2 members. But let's see how they deal with the last 2 remaining, of Toga and Tomura Shigaraki." We now shift over to the view of Uraraka. Uraraka was running down the streets alongside of some of her other classmates, that being Momoya Rozu, Tokajiro, Rigoro Sato, Hantasero, Ida Tenya, and their teacher Snipe. They were looking for Midoriya. Nezu had told them earlier that they should go out and look for Midoriya. and hopefully he could be able to give them more information how to beat this game. But they've already had a good idea how to beat it. They had to defeat all the villains in order to actually get back to their world. Well, on the very least, have their brains put back in their bodies. Ochako proceeded to use her quirk and allow her to float up to the top of the building and look down for any opponents nearby. She used some gun-hand martial arts on the opponent that was up there, eliminated him by snapping his neck when he was downed. No other AI players were alerted to this. She gave a thumbs up down to her teacher and her friends, pointing out there was no one nearby. She then started to run around more and jumped from that building to the next beside it, and then used her quirk again to jump across the entire street to get to the taller building nearby. She then proceeded to summon her mech and used the ability to levitate up to the top. When she got up, she desummoned it, and she ran up to the final area. She looked down and saw that her class was having to deal with some opponents. It was a group of at least 20 player AI. She proceeded to summon her mech like some of her other classmates did, and she shot down a bullet that was of pure energy. When it came in contact with one player, it immediately started levitating that person up while giving significant damage, and also proceeded to lift multiple other players up. It lifted it in total of around 15 or so. And then right as it reached right in front of her, she shot again, and this caused them to go careening down with increased gravity, and this proceeded to down the entire group. The 5 remaining were automatically dispatched, and pretty much were eliminated right there on the spot. They didn't really stand a chance against them. They were just there to be cannon fodder and hope to slow down the heroes, while the villains could pick them off one by one. They were trying harder and harder to win this game in order to get back home, and hopefully make sure these villains don't come back with them. They had killed these villains around a few months ago, had locked them away in Tartarus, or any other place that could hold them. They eventually decided to just go on ahead and put them on death row, because they were most likely going to get out sooner than later. It was a good thing they did, because a few days before this happened, they were said to have broken out of Tartarus. Achaka was kind of scared, but within the next few days, they never saw Toga or any of the villains that survived, especially Dobby, who never survived the attack. And they were still having to keep an eye out for Compress, Muscular, and the others who were still out there. They were a little afraid because these were some S-rank villains or something along those lines, but they learned that they could take them. It would be a very difficult fight, but they could beat them. So, Ochako, while thinking this over, had an idea. Why not take out Toga next? Because she had heard earlier over her headset and through the world, well, the map sheet they were in, more like it, that there's only 2 villains remaining, Toga and Tomura Shigaraki. She knew Izuku wanted to be the one to deal with Shigaraki. Uraka then leapt down to her closest friend, Momo, and right before she could speak, a knife was thrown at her and sunk into the ground next to Uraka's feet, and directly into Momo's foot. Momo let out a gasp of pain, and she bent down and ripped the knife out. She proceeded to use some bandages and wrap the foot, which immediately was healed. She looked up with the knife reversed like a dagger in her hand, and Uraraka met Momo's gaze, and they both looked up towards where the knife had come from. Momo automatically calculated where the knife came from and pointed directly back up there, back to where it came from. She said, "Right there," and proceeded to throw the knife directly back at it. The knife was immediately deflected, and the person up there had jumped down and was careening down towards them. Whoever it was then summoned a mech that looked oddly familiar to Uraraka. The person then sunk their one arm into the building and were slowly careening down. The person then desummoned their mech and looked up and said, "Uraraka, I want you to bleed." It was Himiko Toga. She proceeded to leap towards Uraraka specifically. Momo was able to summon a bat and knock her unconscious. Well, that was easier said than done. But soon as she dropped the bat on top of Toga's head, hopefully knocking her out more, Toga, or who they thought was Toga, turned to mud. The real Toga was still up there. She looked down and said, "You really think that I would be the one to come down there? I find if I were to make one clone using twice's blood, it could use the mech too. And it looks like Shigaraki's idea works out." She then proceeded to turn to twice once again, and she created clone after clone of herself. Each of them came careening down and used a quirk from someone's blood she had gathered before. Class 1 was having a hard time defeating these clones because they all were kitted out to the nines with knives. This was because Toga had a lot of knives on her. She proceeded to jump down herself in order to get closer up, and the Toga clones were rushing towards Snipe to hopefully take him out and make sure he can't help Izuku defeat Shigaraki this time, because Toga had the sneaking idea from Shigaraki that Snipe would try to harm him and help Izuku Midoriya defeat him. The Class 1A group that was there were still fighting off the Toga clones, but were slowly making work of them. Momo had made multiple guns. She made 2 frost-like weapons and used them to freeze the Toga clone solid. Then Dinky came in sooner rather than later with the others, and each of them proceeded to shatter the Toga clones that were frozen solid. This started thinning out the Toga clones very lot quicker. Rigedo Sato had devoured more sugar than usual. He was just being a bulldozer and running through them like they were wet toilet paper. They were still hoping to have Izuku come by sometime soon and hopefully help them, but he never was able to come. Izuku was busy fighting Shigaraki by himself. It was a battle that was completely devastating the land around them. The only people who knew where he was were Shigaraki himself, because they were fighting Nezu, All Might, and Uraraka. Momo was the first one to realize that Toga was nearby, so she proceeded to summon her own mech and just used the mech's ability to coat it in armor. She then proceeded to create a gun on one arm and a sword out of the other. She then leapt towards the real Toga while swiping and destroying the Toga clones that were in her way. The others, the real Toga that is, and her clones that were around her, all proceeded to rush towards her, but the real Toga soon stopped and summoned her own mech. This one then immediately took the form of Toru's mech, which shifted in and out of visibility and snuck up on Momo every now and again and delivered a devastating blow to one joint or the other. Momo was able to pinpoint where the next one would come from, and she used her taser like a gun and shot it directly into the Toga mech's face. This severely damaged the mech, and Toga could no longer see through it, so she had to tear off some more metal in order for her to have a good look and see outside. But this was a mistake, because Ochako Uraraka was standing right outside on Momoyaro's mech's shoulder, and she leapt directly into it and punched Toga directly in the face, causing the mech to start stumbling backwards. And Uraraka was just leaning into the punches and completely decimating Toga's face. Toga eventually managed to use her mech's arm and grab Uraraka and pull her out. Uraraka then touched the robot's arm, and the robot started levitating off the ground. Uraraka then pulled out of the arm by pulling off the hands, and she jumped down and summoned her own mech next to Momo. Momo's mech then proceeded to summon a little piece of metal that was sharp and give it to Uraraka's mech. Uraraka's mech then proceeded to use that dagger, that metal dagger of sorts, and throw it up to the Toga mech. This completely sliced through it, destroying it in half. Toga then came careening down towards the earth, and right on cue, Shoto used his fire and downed her. When she hit the ground, she was eliminated from the game. A voice came over and said, "Well, that was interesting. Called me thoroughly impressed and entertained, shall we? Well, let's just see that. Izuku Midoriya still having to fight. Shigaraki all by himself. Let's see how y'all deal with him, shall we?" Everyone soon enough would have a message telling them the exact location of where the fight of Izuku Midoriya and Tomoyasu Shigaraki was. The group decided to come up with a plan. The plan involved Toru running in, that is, once they found them, Toru running in as bait alongside Shoto and Kirishima, just in case there was multiple players nearby, in order to make sure they won't be able to down anyone. They decided that this would be the best plan, whereas the teachers and some of the other stronger hitters, melee fighters that is, would be behind them in the front lines, behind the bait, and were to defeat anyone that were to follow them back, and were to hope, and some of the teachers would be in their mechs shooting or racing, in a racer's case, capturing or defeating any other player that was in their way. This plan sounded solid on paper, but was going to be a lot harder to pull off. The reason why was because of Shigaraki's decay quirk which was amplified because of this place, but also his mech's ability of decay, which was, if not as nasty, or nastier than his own. Soon after they got the plan all set up, Kyokujiro had found the others, and she used her headset and communicated to her group and said, "Found the teachers. Goto was unconscious. They were having to guard him to make sure no one would eliminate him. And by far his mech is powerful. It's a snipe, and if I remember correctly, a hit and run." They soon heard a voice come over Kyoka's and said, "It's a snipe and assault, Kyoka, and yes, we're nearby." It was Eraserhead. Man, oh man, Kyoka was happy to hear one of her teachers. That's all. Okay. That's good news. Okay, what about the other students? As I said, Momo came over the intercom in their headsets and said, "They're fine. A few of them were injured, but we came up with a plan after healing them. Toru, you, Kirishima, and someone else, we decided not to put in the other person because they were also a heavy hitter. You, Tokiyami, and Ojiro were going to be the ones that used as bait, and Kirishima would be behind y'all, making sure none of y'all were to be injured. And if y'all are, he would be able to give y'all either some protection or some thing that could heal y'all." Toru said, "Why does she have to be the bait mainly?" This was because of Toru's ability to go invisible and deal sneak attacks a lot more easily. Toru agreed, and Nezu said that he could come up with the plans for the defenses and offensive in the group. Momo agreed to this, and they decided to meet up in a plaza that was nearby, both of them. After waiting for a while, Kyoka met up with her own group, and she stopped them cold in their tracks because she said that, "I hear hundreds, if not possibly a few thousand, feet running this way." They all decided to duck into a building, and she go over her speakers and said, by using her earphone jack quirk, plugging it into her headset and plugging it into her speakers, and she said, "Class 1A and few A faculty, there's a group of at least a few hundred or a few thousand AI players coming this way. We need to set up an ambush." The AI players couldn't hear this was because it would just ruin this person's entertainment. But the person decided to allow a few of the AIs to hear this in order to see what would happen. And what happened was some AIs were made fun of, whereas some of the higher ranking ones agreed that they should possibly make an offensive, defensive area and set up an ambush themselves. So both sides were going to set up an ambush for one another. But UA, just because they had less people, doesn't mean they were outmatched. They had a lot more firepower than this group, due to how scarce most resources were. Most of them had maybe one piece of blue gear, whereas green was more common. The leaders, though, had purple gear and purple weaponry. The others Now, back to Class 1A and the UA faculty and their teachers. They had set up ambushes with people with sniper guns on top of the roofs. People with heavy-hitting mechs were in the front, and Kyoka was able to get off when they were coming in. She let off 3, 2, 1, and then the attack commenced. In the beginning of the fight, it seemed like they were losing, and because they were being overwhelmed of the sheer numbers. Thousands of these AIs, even though they were in pretty weak armor, they were still high amounts of them. Their weaponry was improved to purple gear by the time they reached them somehow. They were being fought head on in fields. They were programmed to know everything about where to hide, where to grip, and where to practically be immortal. That was the reason why they were being such a pain to deal with. But due to his training, Brigada Sato and Tinya Ida and Sarah all three were able to change the tide of the fight. Brigada Sato was able to use his power, his mech. Like I was saying, Brigada Sato was using his quirk and mech's ability to, whenever he ingested sugar, for his quirk that is, his strength would increase, but his mech would also gain more power. He could also ingest sugar while in the mech, but it wouldn't really be absorbed by him, but the mech. His mech was immune to energy-based attacks. Matter of fact, they made his mech regardably a lot stronger than Sugar actually did. It was like electricity was sugar for the mech. The mech completely absorbed any EMP-based attack that was aimed directly at him, which, trust me, was quite a few because of how many ion cannons the enemy had. There was at least 15,000 in total AI, and around 1,000 of them had ion cannons that were pointing directly at mechs. And around 5,000 of the others were in their mechs. This caused multiple explosions, but due to the near indestructibility of most of these buildings, the explosions weren't really felt or dealt with. So Class 1A and the group that was of Class 1A at the moment were able to hold off the fight. Still, All Might hasn't, and the others hasn't shown up with Coda yet. But soon enough, they did. Eraserhead, as soon as he came onto the scene, he activated his own mech and erased every single mech from there. Pretty much shutting down its power. It couldn't move. It was pretty much paralyzed. Brigada Sato was able to use this to his advantage, jumping onto a roof, running across it with the help of Uraka, and he jumped down on top of the group that was in their mechs, and he proceeded to summon his own mech and proceeded to completely demolish them. He was shooting beams of energy from one cannon, using another to punch the air, releasing energy itself, paralyzing them, or completely decimating them, or downing the enemies that were already out of their mechs. Some were shooting ion cannons at him, but didn't work. They found that the missiles were doing the most work. But Ajiro Kirishima soon stepped in and dealt with those. And the ones he didn't deal with, he were protecting Brigada Sato from. Brigada Sato's mech was pretty damaged by the end of it. But together, him, Kirishima, had dealt with at least half of the 1,000, so around 500 remaining. And the 500 remaining were scattered. Not 500. 2,500 were remaining, scattered. And Kyokujiro with the help of Nezu and a few others, decide to split the team up into smaller groups to hopefully hunt these down, which they did, and Rico, Sato, and Kirishima were left alongside All Might, Nezu, and Eraserhead to deal with them, the remaining force of at least of 9,000 soldiers. Sato looked at the others, and he looked at him. Kirishima hardened his body in his mech and in his actual body. He hardened both to make sure nothing would happen. Nezu started calculating on their chances of survival. Nezu popped up and said, "We have a 75% chance of survival if we aim for them," gesturing to a group that consisted of 2 Hurricanes, 1 Arthur, and 5 Hot Steels. Those are the commanders. They should be able to be taken out a lot faster. Zero, can you wrap them up? Zero nodded his head and ran into a building to collect some materials to improve his own mech. More like modules, because he had only had a few blue and 1 green attack module. Nezu nodded his head, knowing what he was doing, and he said to the others, "Everyone else, hold them off." The 1,000 people with the ion cannons were already decimated, so there was a lot of ion cannons sitting around. A few of the people from the remaining group picked up the fallen ion cannons and started shooting at Class 1A. Most attacks were avoided, but every now and again, someone would see a green flash of lightning come by, followed by a gray or blue flash, and falling close by, leaving a trail of decay and destruction beside them. These waves and attacks were Izuku and Shigaraki. Their fight had come into the area. Nezu decided to have All Might lure them away to make sure that nothing really gets damaged. They agreed to this, and All Might and Rigida Sato proceeded to get their attention and lure them away. Izuki saw that they were trying to do, and saw that his teammates were trying to defeat some other enemies. So he decided to lure Shigaraki away. And before Shigaraki could see the Class 1A pretty much being overwhelmed and finish them off himself, he decided and before he could decide to attack them, Izuku punched him in the face, catching his attention, which caused him to follow Izuku, All Might, and Sato. Soon after, Zero peered through a window and saw them leaving, so he finally managed to get the modules he needed and rushed back out and summoned his own mech. It resembled his hero costume somewhat well, but instead of glands or organs on his arms, they were cannons. He could shoot off an energy blast or shoot off a blast of energy that was really, really sticky. It would actually wrap around the opponent and actually keep them trapped in place for a while. And if there was anyone nearby, like a building, they would actually be stuck to it. He could also use to fling around, like Spider-Man, similar to how Floppy would with her tongue. He used this ability to fly around and swing around the area, trapping down multiple enemies, and eventually it was just him and the commanders alone, with the rest of Class 1A dealing with the remnants of the army. of around 9,000. All of the commanders looked at one another, then looked at Zero, and Zero smiled, and he proceeded to shoot a few energy blasts off one arm, and then, in the confusion, he wrapped them all up and flung them into a building, destroying at least 2 of the hot steel mechs. He then leapt in, but he was met with a barrage of bullets by both of the Hurricane. It appeared that the Author mech was the supreme commander of the army, so he was aiming for that one. But before he realized what was happening, the Author mech has already blitzed in front and slashed him off a few times, paralyzing his mech in place. Sarah was having a hard time getting it off, but when it finally wore off, he was already severely damaged, but he couldn't change already. So he kept fighting, and as soon as his mech was destroyed, he flew up and onto the closest building, started shooting multiple bullets off, trying to injure the Author mech. Soon after he was captured and he was shooting off, he was cornered by the mechs. He couldn't find a way down except for firing off the other end, but there's 2 alleyways that led into the ocean, the river from earlier, and he had a very slow swim time. They would most likely have been able to get to him, and he was stuck behind a wall, constantly getting shot at. That was when Tiny Ida came back in his human form, not in his mech, and said to Zero and everyone else, "We already got them all. Whoa, I've already got most of them. Well, we need to deal with the commanders." And he was shot in the face by a bullet. He got back up after healing himself, and he was not happy, seeing how one of his friends were trapped up there. He then proceeded to blitz towards the commanders, and kick one of the Hurricane's shoulder rocket joints out of place and completely ripped it off. He then proceeded to lip up and kick downwards using his thrusters, his engines and his calves, that is, to bring the kick down harder, and completely decimated the mid-center of the mech, completely destroying the first Hurricane mech. He then got up and looked directly at the other one. The other one soon started to shoot more bullets at him and launched a few rockets a few times. He dodged most of these, but sometimes he was hit, mostly by the bullets. He managed to dodge almost all the rockets, except for once and when that rocket connected, he was flung into a building. The building of which Zero was on the top of. Zero then, seeing this confusion, he leapt down and summoned his own mech. And he then proceeded to wrap up, finally, the one mech he was targeting, the Author mech. Nezu came in and launched off a few full bullets off in 2 different directions. It appeared that they weren't doing anything, but he could tell that they were doing something, because he heard things crashing and things starting to break. He then managed to gain some momentum behind a few kicks and a few punches by swinging around with the Author mech in tow. The Author mech was completely and fully paralyzed. It could not move at all, not even use an attack or even eject. Everything was shut down except for the sight. It could not move. The pilot tried escaping, but escape was futile practically. So he just gave up and was sitting down and waiting until Sarah would drop him. But he looked down and saw Ida completely decimating most of his other commanders. He soon tried gaining more control of the mech, but soon after, Sarah then proceeded to slam it down head first, eliminating the mech and one of the 2 hot steel mechs remaining. Using this, Ida managed to finally get up to the one Hurricane mech and kick it so hard one leg got flung right off. and it tipped over. He then used his engines again, and reciprocal bursted through the head of the mech, completely decimating the AI player that was in there. He then leapt towards the next mech and summoned his own mech. He then used one cannon to start charging off one powerful attack, and he started shooting off mini lasers with the other. Using the fact that his next legs were big to his advantage for mostly defense, he was kicking and punching and shooting the other mechs a few times, but the hot steel mech was not going down. That was until Sarah came in and snuck up behind him and punched him in the back of the head, causing the hot steel mech to fall down. There was still one hot steel mech remaining, though, and the pilot and the other one. But Nezu's bullet that he shot off earlier came flying in and completely eliminated both targets in an instant. So, both pilots were out, both hot steel mechs were done with. Now, they just need to deal with Shigaraki. But they soon remembered about the final respawn center they had to deal with still. So they decided to split off into two groups after the remaining Class 1As came back. They came in and saw that everyone was dealt with, and then they heard, "Well, it appears that all my respawn centers have been destroyed. Let's see how y'all deal with Shigaraki, though. And by the way, the reason why the last respawn center has been destroyed is simply because of the fight y'all just had. Oh, and the fact that the fight between Izuku and Shigaraki that came through here earlier damaged it pretty badly. But the fight y'all just had was the straw that broke the camel's back, would you say?" Hearing this, every single Class 1A member that was there left a sigh of relief. But they soon realized they had to get back up into the fight. So they started charging not in their mechs, but except for a handful like Nezu and All Might, were charging towards where they could find them. All Might had come back and given a report of where he found them and where they were fighting at most of the time. It was a baseball field. Soon enough, Snipe was already there, and he started shooting off a few bullets, trying to aim for Shigaraki's head, just like he did in the USJ. Shigaraki saw this coming a few times and managed to disintegrate most of the bullets, but a few hit their target, damaging his mech somewhat, but not a whole lot. Soon enough, Snipe finally decided to use his own mech. His mech was summoned and it resembled his hero costume quite a lot. It looked like a cowboy, but one arm was unmistakably a larger revolver. He used this to have 12 shots, and each shot was able to take out a hurricane mech in one, with all green in one shot. So, pretty powerful in his regards. But he could tell Shigaraki's mech had all purple. So he started firing off multiple rounds at a time. But most were either dodged, disintegrated, but the ones that did meet the target did cause some significant damage, but were soon healed up. Shigaraki didn't have a healing factor, but his mech surely did. It was a program he installed before while running around. Class 1A soon came in, mostly in their pilots, and they started shooting at Shigaraki. Izuku came in a few times and blitzed towards Shigaraki, knocking him off center. But soon enough, Shigaraki got up and started bolting away. Izuku started running after him, and so did Snipe. He was running after him as well. He let off a few shots every now and again, he had to reload, constantly having to reload and shoot multiple times. He finally had enough and stopped in place, kneeled down, whipped out his gun, and decided to let all bullets fly as a blitz attack he had. He proceeded to use every single amount of ammunition he had and his own mech's power supply in order to actually deal with Shigaraki. His bullet flung through the air, shooting directly into Shigaraki's mech, dismantling one weaponry. Shigaraki finally decided to desummon his mech to have it repaired. This is keen on my last nerve. He then touched the ground, caused a decay wave to swing towards Snipe. Snipe was not having a fast reaction time, but he managed to dodge the incoming wave. First of 5. The second wave hit his arm. He gasped in pain, but he shrugged it off. He started running toward Shigaraki. Shigaraki then touched the ground again, seeing another third decay wave. He dodged this one, but his pinky was disintegrated. He finally managed to get close enough to whip out his gun using his right hand. It wasn't the best shot. He was mostly left-handed, and he managed to shoot off a few rounds and hit Shigaraki in the shoulder. Shigaraki then let off 2 more waves at the same time. One disintegrated his gun, and then finally disintegrated him. Well, look at that. Snipe has been eliminated from the game. The first hero to go down. Let's see how this fight ends, shall we? Shigaraki was panting. Having lost a weapon in the mech, he was seriously outgunned, literally and figuratively. So he decided to revert back to his pilot form, well, his base form anyways, and use his quirk to hopefully destroy some of the other mechs. Class 1A, hoping to deal with Shigaraki faster, had all summoned their mechs, and one by one they came in, hoping to deal with him. First up was Soji. Soji came in and used his own mech Tentacoil and shot off both attacks, which could summon multiple limbs or lasers or bigger hands to hopefully bind him down. Followed by Magneto, hopefully to bind him down using his sticky balls. Katsuki came in and shot a few fireballs off, but every single attack did hit, but a few missed, although. The reason why the attacks landed and missed is because Shigaraki, they did land, but he disintegrated them, counting as a miss. But the explosions had hit him and had injured him badly. He was down to 10 HP before he could summon his mech again, but he didn't. He waited. He decided to let the mechs, to allow them to get up close, and especially Bakugo. He was hoping Bakugo would cause panic when he disintegrated his mech. Bakugo, being the cocky arsehole he was, walked up and smugly said, "This is what you stupid villain." But before he could say anything else, his mech was fully disintegrated by Shigaraki's touch. You really need to learn to look where you are. And also pay attention to the people you're fighting. Katsuki and his mech fell down to a pile of dust. Well, look at that! Shigaraki has eliminated once again another hero in training this time from the game. Don't worry though, the people who were alive before this game are still alive. I may be cruel, but I'm not a monster. Shigaraki said, "She better help our deal though." He looked up back at Class 1A and started to become angry. "Almighty, you're still here. I thought you were going to be defeated earlier on." "Sorry, young Tomura. This ain't gonna happen. It's gonna end here." "Why, I'm already dead and you're over it all." If I was perfectly left alone, I would have conquered this world. We were summoned here just for this person's entertainment. No, you weren't summoned. You chose to come. No, we weren't Shigaraki, Izuku said as he proceeded to plunge a fist directly toward Shigaraki. Shigaraki evaded and tried to disintegrate, but Izuku pulled his hand back fast enough. Shigaraki finally managed to heal himself enough and summoned his mech and shot towards Class 1A. As he came closer, Nezu fired off 2 more bullets that started bouncing around. Shigaraki managed to shoot a blast off to his K1, but he didn't see where the other one was. And when it finally connected when the first one finally connected, it hit him and knocked him off course. But the blast he let off the second round had finally hit its target at the feet of most of the Class 1A. The ground around them started to decay, affecting them one by one. Soon enough, Class 1A was gone. Well, let's see, shall we? The people remaining in Class 1A are Izuku Midoriya, Midnight, Nezu, as well as Soji and Tokiyami. Oh, and Kirishima. Everyone else has been eliminated from the game. Let's see how this fight ends, shall we? Now this is me signing off one more time until the game finally ends. Izuku got back up on his feet and blitzed towards his remaining classmates. He quickly had them come up with a plan that required Mineta to shoot down Shigaraki in his mech. Nezu would let off 2 more bullets that would bounce around, build up a lot of momentum behind them. And Midnight would use her quirk to hopefully make him pass out. And Kirishima would be the rock and be a shield practically in front of them as others were let off their attacks. They got into their formations, and Kirishima stood near Nimue, aka Midnight, mostly, because her mech was fairly weak. He proceeded to harden his body, and Izuku got up and blitzed towards Shigaraki not using his mech whatsoever. Shigaraki shot a bullet off towards him, but Izuku used Black Whip and proceeded to throw it directly back at him. Somehow he knew Black Whip had some energetical properties. It could interfere with energy, and he used that ability to fling the attack directly back towards Shigaraki. Shigaraki being immune to his own quirk, but he still took a little damage because of the energies coming off of it from Izuku's Black Whip. After he was hit, they heard a voice say, "Also, quick note. Once the mech is destroyed, since this should be the final fight, the mech will no longer be able to resummon it. Well, be resummoned, that is. Now, let's see. Now, please continue." Izuku was happy to hear that he would not have to deal with Shigaraki's mech once again. But Shigaraki decided to let off a blast towards his class. But Mineta had already launched his sticky balls, which were flying directly towards him. But the decay blast hit them and disintegrated them. So Mineta decided to let off 2 more later. So he saved his ammunition for his own special attack of his mech. He proceeded to desummon it and climb onto a building and proceeded to take aim, whereas Nezu let off 2 more bullets right when Izuku gave the signal of a thumbs up to a thumbs down and pointing at Shigaraki. That was the signal when Nezu let off his bullet. They started bouncing around, building a lot of momentum, And eventually, Shigaraki had his back turned while fighting Izuku, and they shot him back in the head and one back in the shoulder. the opposite shoulder of where Snipe had hit him earlier. His mech was down to 1000 HP. So finally, Mineta finally managed to resummon his mech and shoot off a few sticky balls, which restrained him down. That restrained Shigaraki, that is. Shoto proceeded to use his fire and ice to create a heat wave attack that would make Shigaraki very, very fatigued. But due to the mech, it damaged the mech and actually caused one arm to melt and freeze off. Shigaraki got up and used his one decay can remaining. He hoisted it up and proceeded to wipe out Shigaraki. Well, not Shigaraki. Shoto, Nezu, Mineta, and Kirishima himself. But Midnight was the last one to stand. She got up and released her mech's power, the full thing, and plunged her sword directly into Shigaraki's mech. It took down to 500 HP. Shigaraki was about to launch an attack directly into her face, where she released her quirk from her mech, and it started to destroy his mech. Soon enough, Shigaraki let off the blast, and her mech was destroyed, but not also herself. Well, it appears Midnight has been eliminated from the game, along with everyone else, minus Shigaraki and Izuku Midoriya. Finally, Izuku managed to step on top of Shigaraki when Shigaraki's mech was fully destroyed. And the voice came back over and said, "Well, it appears this game is over." Sorry. What I was saying was, it appears this game is over, and Izuku Midoriya and the heroes have won. That was the story of MHA Class 1A versus Villains Mecha Battle Royale. I hope you all enjoyed today's video, because I'm afraid that's all my for today. Until next time, subscribe to join Sparkers on me, or Demon's Alliance. Goodbye, and peace out, everyone.